when there's a tragedy or some kind of dramatic, violent thing that happens, like this latest incident in Minneapolis, people love to rush to judgment and rush to, conclusions. They jump to conclusions and they rush to judgment instead of doing the more sensible thing, which is to just be patient and, by all means assess things as you see them, as they happen. And, I'm not saying you can't, make judgments as information comes in, but you should reserve a final judgment until more thorough data is available. That's kind of, what I, with this particular thing and just things in general, that's what I'm doing, is I'm keeping an eye on it and reading about it and watching videos as they come in, and, I'm curious about what we will uncover in the future as time goes on, but right now, and this whole time, there has not been enough information to make any kind of educated, informed judgment as to exactly what happened, or, exactly who is to blame, or, who the bad guy is, who the good guy is. It's, you have to wait until you actually have a fuller understanding of the situation before it's prudent to start making declarations of this person is guilty, this person is innocent, this this is the good guy, this is the bad guy, because you don't know until you have more information and you actually give a situation enough time to become clearer. But, everyone, well, not every, most people, I think, rush to judgment, and they just, they just see the initial video, and they hear the initial story, and they just quickly, probably just on an automatic basis, they just form an idea of what happened, and then they run with it, and then they just, they latch onto that idea, and they can't let go because of pride, and sometimes practical considerations, but often it's just pride. People just don't want to back down once they've, and that's why I think it's because no one likes to back down and admit we were wrong, right? Like when especially if it's something controversial that people are going to judge us for. No one likes to, have to back down from an assertion that we made and admit, nope, I was just wrong about that. I try to, I try to be that way. I try to be willing to, and I think I succeed. I think when I am just wrong about something, that I made a snap judgment about, I think I am overall very good about that, not meaning to sound immodest or anything, just honest, but still it is difficult, and it is embarrassing. I think anyone who says he or she is not embarrassed when you have to retract a position, and you have to retract a statement when you committed to something, when you said, no, this is what happened, and then it turned, later more information comes out and you realize, oh, okay, that was actually, I was wrong. It's embarrassing, sometimes even humiliating to admit that, and to be okay with to be willing to admit that we were wrong, and swallow our pride and say, yeah, no, I was wrong. I shouldn't have, I made the wrong call, and that's not what happened. I was wrong. And, and then I think a lot of people just won't even go that far. Like the pain, the humiliation, the embarrassment of going back on what they said before, it's too much, and so they just dig in deeper, and they cling to their original judgment of something. Even if they know that, even if they know, if like deep down, even if they know that their initial judgment was just flat out wrong in light of new evidence, and if the situation changes, and the people will not. A lot of people won't back down and won't admit that they were wrong because of pride, and maybe depending on if it's someone like in a position of influence, or power, or a position in the media, something like that. They might have kind of pragmatic, financial reasons, or image reasons to not want to give an inch on that, and where they would rather just doggedly stick to their original judgment, even knowing full well that it's wrong. And so they'll just try to twist facts and twist things into a shape that maintains the believability of their original stance and their original judgment. And so most people who make snap judgments on situations like this, the second law enforcement related shooting in Minneapolis, which is where I was born, incidentally. So it's very interesting, very strange, very embarrassing and aggravating to see all of this. See all of this play out. What is it? Has it been weeks? Has it been a month yet? But all this nonsense with going on in the Twin Cities. It rings true personally. And so when people rush to judgment on things like this, so I think most people who rush to judgment, they're doing so for political reasons, right? Like I just mean like ordinary people, people who don't have any particular reason to jump to conclusions, not in the way of like, oh, they're they that's their job or anything like that, just people who want to express their opinions on it. Most of them, I think, they see a situation like that, and they go to basically they just it's like, okay, like what side do I perceive myself being on, and then they just they see it through that lens, and they just usually go with that. They just go with whether it supports what they consider to be their side, politically or ideologically or whatever. They just go with that, right? So you have people jump to conclusions and like say like, oh, this guy deserved it. If that suits their existing, their pre-existing bias, and then you have people on the other side who say like, oh no, he was completely innocent. He didn't deserve it at all. It's completely the fault of the other people. If that suits their bent, their bias. And so you got people like that, and then you also have people who want to react to it, to something developing, something like a hot story, a hot tragedy, developing story like that, and they want to react to it, and they want to get their take on it right away, because that's their job to one degree or another. That's their job. So you have like you have the social media people, social media influencers, whatever, that people who that's their job, or at least something they want to get their name out there, and so they'll so before there's time to form a well-founded opinion on what happened, or to make like a proper judgment, they'll just rush to it, because because that benefits them. Like even if they're wrong, it doesn't usually hurt them that much. Sometimes I would imagine it does, but most of the time they're fine. like most of the time, and most of them are also, they, whether, regardless of what they personally believe, like they usually affiliate with one side or the other, and so they, it's often pretty safe for them to make just a split second knee jerk judgment, because even if they're wrong, the people who watch them, the people who listen to them, the people who pay attention to them and want their opinion on these kind of things, like they usually are fine that um, with that quick judgment, because it usually is going to support what they want, is going to be what they want to hear anyway, and so it's fine. So that they don't mind that much. And yeah, and it, even if people are wrong, when they people in influence, even if they're wrong about this, then it usually doesn't matter, because they can just kind of stick to their guns, and even if they have to retract, even if they have to back down at some point, by that time people have often, largely kind of forgotten about it, so it doesn't even matter. It should matter. I'm just saying that it realistically most of the time doesn't. And yeah, so I think that, I would say, and then of course you got like politicians and people like that, who also have a reason to give a quick, this is good, this is bad, this person's good, this person's bad. Give a quick snap judgment on these things, for obvious reasons, because that's their job. That they need to appeal to their voters, and so they need to give their opinion on it, so that they can appeal to their voters, and people will listen to them, and either love them or hate them for it. And yeah, and so I think that's people who rush to judgment on these things. I mean, really, the sad, because I can understand absolutely people who have a practical reason. It's their job to make these snap judgments, and to just like go on record as saying, hey, look, this is clearly this. I'm 100% sure that this guy's bad, these people are bad, whatever, whichever way they lean, and so I can understand why they would do it, because it's a pragmatic thing for them. I mean, I'm sure also it's to a degree genuine, because like usually they're not just like total frauds, right? Like, people don't necessarily believe what they preach, but it's not just a total lie, and usually they do, to one degree or another, have genuine beliefs in the things that they promote, to varying degrees. So I can understand why they would feel that way and do that. But I think people, just ordinary people like us, right? Like you and me, who we don't really benefit from jumping to these conclusions, do we? I mean, how does that benefit us? I guess, I mean, like, I can see why you feel like you have to defend your political side and that kind of thing. And, I understand. I can see that. I just don't think it's really, I don't think the benefit really exists in the way that people might think it does. Because, well, for one thing, I mean, most people, I think, are kind of, like, if they care about things like this, I think to one degree or another, they're usually kind of committed to their side and their team, and they're usually not swayed by these things so much. And some people are, but I think people like feel like they can't be seen, perceived on any level. Not even if it's just like, if it's not, a lot of people might think that their reaction to these things is more important than it is. But I think people feel like they can't. I think they often feel like they can't be seen or perceived as to be wavering in their support, right? Like, if you just wait and see, and don't just like immediately leap to the defense of one side or the other, then it's like, oh no, what if people on the other side, what if undecided people are swayed, and like, what if there's doubt? What if it inspires doubt among my people, and then it's what if it, like, it's perceived as being, what if it weakens my side? And I just don't think that, I think it would be better to just try to maintain some composure and not leap blindly into the chaos of unsubstantiated opinions, and all that, all the chaos that can inspire when we just jump to conclusions and start hurling our judgments out like that, all willy-nilly. And yeah, I mean, so, like, okay, because my personal assessment, for what it's worth, of that situation that we're talking about is, and this is my opinion. So I don't think that this particular incident, people might hate that I say this, but I don't think this particular incident really has that much to do with the larger issues that surround this, right? Like, immigration enforcement, and to what degree people are allowed to protest, and that kind of thing. I just don't think this really has any, because, okay, so what is the situation? I mean, as far as I know, basically this man, he had a gun, like, he had a legally owned gun. He was carrying it, and basically he got, people are, like, disagreeing about the specifics of how it happened. Bottom line is, he got into a confrontation with the Border Patrol, and they got into it, like, they were trying to arrest him. He was struggling. He was resisting arrest. They were fighting back and forth. And then, like, the latest thing I've seen is that, and I'm not 100% sure on this. I just, this is the latest thing I've seen, that people are saying that new video footage shows that his the gun that was taken from him, as they were trying to arrest him, it went off, which is something apparently this model of handgun is notorious for. Which is something that I thought was interesting, because I saw people saying this, right when this shooting first occurred. Like, I saw people saying this is the handgun he had, and, like, saying, I had not heard of this before, but people were saying, like, oh, it's infamous for accidental discharge, and it goes off, and it's a menace to everybody near it, and so I thought that's interesting. Like, if that is indeed what happened, then I think that's interesting that seems to have borne out, Oh, anyway, so okay, so like, they're trying to arrest him. Border Patrol's trying to arrest this guy, and he's resisting, and they're fighting back and forth. It looked like one of the Border Patrol agents I saw, it looked like they were, like, striking him with like the butt of a pistol, which like, on the head, which, and maybe I missaw that, but that seems like perhaps a little excessive force. And so there were a lot of guys, a lot of agents, trying to, like, hold him down, trying to secure him. Sounds like maybe his, the confiscated handgun went off accidentally, and then the Border Patrol shoot him many times, and so it's like, that's, and my understanding is that, and there's certainly probably a lot of details that I'm not up to date on, but that's my understanding, basically, as it stands today, of, like, what's going on with that. Okay, so now, so I think what I think we need to do is have a really thorough investigation. Try to hold off on judgment, find out what happened, try to get as much evidence as we can. I mean, I saw that, I read that apparently the Border Patrol agents were, they had body cams on, right? So, I mean, so that's good, that's good. So then hopefully we can get access to that, and we can learn more, and we can keep collecting information. Hopefully we can really figure out what happened as much as possible. Like, we can get as clear a picture as possible, as to what happened here. And then, if it was indeed excessive force, if excessive force was used, if it was not justified, legally speaking, to use lethal force, if they used excessive force, if they used lethal force unjustly, what have you, right? Then we need to hold those responsible accountable, and we need to prosecute them if that is, if any of that is true, because I'm not making any judgments on that right now, because I don't know. I don't have nearly enough information to make any kind of judgment on that. That's something that we will have to be patient, and we will have to wait and see. So yeah, absolutely. If it was excessive, if it was unjustified, the level of force they used on this guy, then absolutely, then it should be, the people responsible. If it was not justified, they should be, held accountable and prosecuted if that is indeed the just, reasonable thing to do, as determined by the facts as we continue to learn them. Yeah. So, okay, now, with that being said, this guy, is it Alex Pretti? I don't know. I don't know how his name is pronounced, but so this guy, he definitely did, my understanding is that he definitely got into the confrontation with the Border Patrol, right? I mean, people say, oh, he was defending, a woman who got pushed down, who maybe he was with, I don't know, but it was, it was another civilian who got pushed down, knocked down on the ground by the Border Patrol, and I did see that in a video, so that's, that's reasonable. That it may have been, that might not have been justified, because just in what I saw, it didn't look justified. It looked like they just pushed this person down, without any particular reason. And, I don't see how that necessarily would be justified, because it didn't seem like this person was threatening them or anything. So I don't know why, just knocking her down on the ground just at first glance, that does not seem reasonable. Not saying that I know what exactly happened, but that part of it doesn't seem reasonable. So then, so my understanding is that then this guy, then he got into a fight of one form or another, however you want to describe it. Basically, he got into a physical confrontation with the Border Patrol agent or agents who had shoved this other civilian, right? Which, okay, so I mean, that's understandable if you saw something like that happen, and it was, if you saw something and it was totally unjustified like that, and you saw an abuse of power like that, I can totally understand getting and involving yourself. I will say that I don't think involving yourself in that way, I don't think getting into a physical confrontation with law enforcement in that situation, even if you think it was totally unjustified, I don't think that's a good, smart idea. I totally understand why he would want to do that and why he would, that would be his impulse. But I don't think it's necessarily a smart thing to do. I would say, and I mean, it would be totally different if if this woman was, just being continuously assaulted or something. I could definitely see potentially that being not unreasonable to physically involve yourself, right, in between these people. If she was being, if it seemed like her life was in danger, or she was in danger of grievous bodily harm or something like that, I can totally understand that. Just based on the video I saw, it did not really seem that way. It seemed like they shoved her and she fell on the ground. I think they might have pepper sprayed her. I'm not sure about that, but regardless, okay, that, absolutely, if if that was not justified in any way, then you should absolutely try to rectify that in a in a reasonable legal fashion. But is it a good idea to basically counterattack, law enforcement of any kind in that situation? I would say honestly, and I mean, like I said, I understand it. I empathize with that. I don't think it's like if you're in full control of your emotions, you should probably stop yourself from doing that. You should probably stop yourself from, um, from responding to that with physical force because I don't know. I mean, even if you like, what are you going to accomplish? Like, honestly, what was he hoping to truly accomplish by getting into a fist fight with a border patrol agent? I mean, that's just a losing proposition. Like, okay, I mean, like bare minimum, like you are probably going to get hurt. They're going to hurt you, taking you down. They're going to arrest you, and it just like you're not really going to help anything by doing that. And so, and especially the fact that he was carrying a gun. Like I don't know. I don't think you should. I've okay. I did a lot of stupid things when I was younger. A lot of stupid criminal things that I'm not proud of. But I will say, and partly it's due to um, divine intervention. I might say I might believe definitely providence. That I didn't do anything that stupid, but I never never got into an altercation with any kind of law enforcement while carrying, I mean, any weapon, but like a gun, certainly, any kind of firearm. Because that's just, I don't know, that's just, I mean, you, I know a lot of people have the opinion that, because of the Second Amendment and everything, it's not, basically they're saying, oh, well, the fact that he, is a legal handgun, like the fact that he was carrying it shouldn't matter at all. I mean, I just think that's kind of naive and maybe even disingenuous to say that, to argue that, because it's like, well, I don't know. I mean, honestly, ask yourself, like, if you're carrying a gun, I think a reasonable person, far from being, extra cavalier about it, is more aware of what he or she does and takes extra precautions, as opposed to being just being like, okay, I'm gonna go start a fight now, like I'm gonna go interfere with with law enforcement, because I don't know, like if you're I'm not saying it should end in anyone dying or anything like that. I think a reasonable person could see that being a possible end result of getting into a physical altercation with any kind of police if you are armed, right? Like having the weapon on you makes it more dangerous if that's something that you think you might do. Like if you think there's any chance that you're going to start stuff with the police, you probably shouldn't have your gun on you, because that is just going to make it 100 times more dangerous for you. I mean, that's just my 2 cents on it. I don't think a reasonable person would want to get into that situation, especially when, having something on your person that's going to, I mean, it's not exactly the same thing, but it's like, imagine if you, imagine if you had a bunch of illegal drugs on your person. You probably, I'm not saying it's the same thing at all, but like, you should probably be extra careful not to get into a fight with any kind of law enforcement, right? If you have a bunch of heroin on you or something, you should probably be extra careful to avoid that, because it's just making it, it's making it worse for yourself. It's putting yourself at much greater risk, not really for any reason. Like You should avoid trouble if you have something on you that could amplify trouble if you get into trouble doing something else. Oh, okay, so then anyway, the point is that so this Alex Pretti, so they're tussling, right? Him, Border Patrol are all tussling. They're trying to arrest him. He's struggling, he's resisting, he's fighting, he's wrestling against them. They take they take his handgun, they confiscate his handgun, take it off him. Something happens, and then they shoot him repeatedly. Yeah, and that then, I mean, I don't know. I guess I want to know more. If his handgun went off, and maybe they thought, maybe these Border Patrol agents thought he was shooting at them. Maybe they thought he had another weapon on him or something. That's not unreasonable. I could see that. I don't know exactly what their training tells them to do in that situation. Maybe in that situation, lethal force is is permitted. Maybe that's what they're supposed to do. It should not be unreasonable. I wouldn't say that is unreasonable if it's you're trying to arrest somebody, he's violent, he already had a weapon on him, you don't know, he's fighting you, it's chaos, you don't know what's going on, you hear, it seems like he's shooting at you, you have reason to believe that maybe he's got another weapon on him, and then if that is indeed what they're trained to do, which is just neutralize him, neutralize the threat, potential threat, as quickly as possible. I don't know. I mean, that would not be unreasonable. I'm not saying that I would personally make that the rules they're supposed to follow. I wouldn't necessarily make that the rules of engagement, make those the rules of engagement, because I don't know. It's, there were a lot of Border Patrol agents on him, and I think using lethal force personally, and at that moment, probably was not the wisest thing to do. But I'm also not in that situation, and I've never been in that particular situation, so I don't know. I mean, if I thought my life was in danger, being law enforcement in that situation or something, I could, I might well feel very differently about it. And I don't claim to know what someone would feel or think in that situation, because I certainly wouldn't want to die. As an outside observer, as a bystander, it's easy to say we should just they should just be super careful, and law enforcement should just be, they should always make sure that they're, make 100% sure that they're not in danger every minute of every day. But I also don't think that's realistic, and I don't think that's necessarily the right thing to do, because, I don't think a lot of innocent people would probably die if they were to be excessively careful. I mean, or they would be too hesitant to use force in the protection of others. I mean, I can see a lot of bad coming from that too. So it's, but okay, so I mean, so that's basically, that's the situation as I see it. This guy got into a fight with law enforcement, and then quite possibly, during the struggle, quite possibly they unjustly used lethal force and killed him. And that is, I think we need to investigate it really thoroughly. I think, if everyone politically wasn't at each other's throats, we should have multiple independent bodies research this and investigate this at the same time and share findings. And, it should be an open process. And, it's probably not going to happen. That's probably not realistic considering the political climate. But, that's what we should do. That's what I would want to do. But, we should try to investigate it as best as we can within those constraints of reality and political pragmatism. And we should do that. And in the meantime, I think we just need to, we need to keep in mind that this is the, okay. What would happen if something similar happened to this, but it was instead of involving, illegal immigration and enforcement of immigration enforcement, if it, instead of that, imagine that the same situation happened, but it was, but like the crime being investigated and the enforcement going on was, was like homicide or burglary or a, you know, like RAPE or something. I don't know if that gets it past YouTube censorship or anything. But imagine it was something like that, like just a crime that like almost everyone agrees we should try to stop. Like that's a reasonable thing for the law to try to prevent, right? Like these crimes, these violent crimes. And I'm not saying illegal immigration is like a violent crime or but I just as an example, like just think about that as an example. Like, okay, so this is so the same thing happens, right? Like somebody gets into into a physical confrontation, fight, resisting arrest with law enforcement, and then they quite possibly unjustly use lethal force, and this person dies. But it's like it was someone interfering with the apprehension of a murderer or something like that. Well, I mean, see, and that's the thing. In that situation, we would pursue justice in this specific case, right? Involving this man, involving the law enforcement agents. We would we would pursue justice, but we wouldn't take it one way or another as either as an indictment for or against the fundamental issue at play. Like it wouldn't reflect, this individual incident wouldn't reflect on the broader issues at all, would it? I don't think so. If this happened, we might say, oh yeah, that was totally unjustified. We need to put some people in jail, in prison. But I really doubt people would say, oh, well, I guess we have to stop policing murder. I guess we have to stop trying to stop trying to prevent RAPE or apprehend burglars or something like that. I don't think anyone, I don't think anyone would take it as an indictment against the law that is in place and that is being enforced, like that the law enforcement agents are trying to enforce in the specific incident, and then this guy got involved and then he died and it might have been unjustified, etc., etc. The fundamental thing at play, like the larger issue, the law that's being enforced, it wouldn't matter, because this is a case where I mean, not to be cruel, but like probably kind of a foolish man did something foolish. He got into an unnecessary, unwise fight, altercation. He definitely shouldn't have resisted arrest. I mean, I would suggest, like, basically under almost any circumstance, if you are if you were being arrested, I mean, you probably shouldn't resist arrest. I mean, what good is going to come of that? Like, how is that going to make anything better? I would suggest not trying to resist arrest. Like, if you're in being arrested, okay, then I mean, if you want, see, and there's another thing, is that, like, if you want to use like passive resistance and just like go dead weight and like and like make the police drag you away, like and just like basically try to interfere to make a political point, then that's I think that's valid, whether or not it's legal. I think, like, okay, I think there's nothing, I think that is fair. I think people, if they want to do that, then by all means do it, because that's a reasonable kind of civil disobedience that can make a political point. Lots of, I mean, so many of the actually effective political movements that involved civil disobedience, that's exactly what they did. They were peacefully non-compliant, very peacefully. Like, they didn't, they just practiced passive resistance. I mean, that's what Gandhi did. That's what civil rights movement did. And I mean, both of those are successful, and lots of other, I'm sure lots of other people have used passive resistance and nonviolent civil disobedience and things like that, but that is effective, and more, perhaps even more importantly, it's moral, because like you're not getting into fights. You're not, you are disobeying. You are not complying with what you can perceive to be unjust laws. But you're doing it in such a way that like you're not trying to hurt anyone. You're not trying to cause chaos. You are just disobeying what you see as unjust laws, and doing it in a really civil kind of like dignified, I would say mostly dignified, I'd say that's pretty dignified. Like I can respect people. I respect people, even if I don't agree with like the cause they're fighting for necessarily, depending on what it is. But like if you're just practicing civil disobedience, passive resistance, if you're just going dead weight, laying in the street, excuse me, like laying in the street, I guess like chaining yourself, handcuffing yourself to buildings and stuff, and basically making it a pain in the butt for law enforcement to remove you, with the intention of like making a political statement by doing so, and like saying, I will not comply with what I perceive to be this unjust law, and I'm gonna make it a pain in the butt for you to get me, take me to jail. And then being arrested is also like part of the political statement, that kind of thing. So that's totally fair. But that's not what this guy did. He got into a fight. I don't know exactly to what extent he assaulted law enforcement, or they physically went after him, whatever. Bottom line is he got into a situation where he was resisting arrest and just struggling, and he was struggling against like 10 agents. And it's like, at that point, like, you're just nothing good. That's my point, is that nothing good can come of that. Like, at that point, like, there's nothing good will come of it. Like, you shouldn't do it because nothing good will come of it. You are just putting yourself in more danger. Like, regardless of how just you think your cause is, I would say, and I mean, because there's cases where there are lots of causes where I think I would chain myself to stuff. I would make them drag me away. I would make them arrest me, that kind of thing. I don't think I would, it's like resisting arrest, that's just stupid. That would be stupid of me, because I'm the only one who's going to get hurt. Like I'm going to get hurt. That is just making things worse and harder for me, and I might get killed. I mean, you never know. Not saying that people should get killed, not saying that should lead to death or anything like that, or serious injury, but it might. I mean, just realistically, like at a certain point, you have to just accept reality and say, yeah, I mean, if, who knows? If you're fighting people, armed men, who are trying to arrest you, and, they don't know what's going on, like they have, and they're very justly feel threatened. Like they are, they have every reason to think that their lives are in danger, because they're in a chaotic situation. People try to kill them all the time, and so it's not like it's unreasonable for them to be I'm not saying trigger happy. I'm just saying, like, to be a little preemptive, maybe. Like if they have reason to think they're in danger, they might kill you. And that's just, and like, and we can definitely see, there's the thing. I would also say, like, we can absolutely, we can change the law if we want to. Like, we can absolutely have conversations about how much force is just. Like, under what circumstances should law enforcement be allowed to use lethal force, all that stuff. Like, but the way to do that is to change the law. Like, we shouldn't be trying to, like, argue about it in the context of this case. Or, I mean, we should address these things. We should have addressed them already if they were that big of an issue. But not, the best time to do something was yesterday, and then, like, the next best time is today. Yeah, and it's like, so, if we want to change that, let's change it now. Let's use the legal process and the democratic process and try to change that. But, Yeah, so I just don't think I don't think one way or another, regardless of how you feel about, immigration enforcement, I don't think this particular case, or indeed the case before that, the Renee Good, I don't think either of those really affects it or reflects on it or has any kind of, it doesn't really change the fact that, like, for good or ill, um, whether the law that is being enforced and that that these people were trying to interfere with and then they died, like, it doesn't really change anything about the law that was being enforced and is being enforced, whether you think it's a good thing or whether you think it's a bad thing, or you're somewhere in between, or you just don't care, whatever. But it is, I just don't. This is like, okay, so this is either a case. Basically, this guy got himself into a bad situation that he shouldn't have, and then he died, and the law enforcement involved might have not been justified in using lethal force against him. But that's, so it's really just involving these people. This is a single incident, and it's just involving these people, and like who's guilty, who's innocent. It's just these people. It has no bearing on any larger political issue, any larger social issue. It's just about these people. So, if you want to argue one way or the other about these larger issues, political, social issues, then argue about those issues. But it has nothing to do, or at least very little to do, with this particular case that we're talking about.